All right, I want to make this vid to show like the clean process of bringing over motion from basically almost any application, as long as you're using FBX. In this particular case, I'm using Lightwave into Blender, but just not the motion to the rig, but actually the motion to the master of the rig. In the case that you're trying to get your character's master to animate, let's for instance, like if your character's not just walking in place, like it's walking throughout the environment, doing anything throughout the environment, falling throughout the environment, anything where the whole entire rig needs to be able to move. So not just in some kind of sequential or cyclical motion. So anyway, this is the fine-tooth detail version of it. And let me just pull up. We're using the Wild Walker here since I just finished doing it. So anyway, so here we have the walker, right? The Wild Walker. As I said before, I use Lightwave specifically. And this is Lightwave 20 or 2020. I call it 20. Right. So we have the Wild Walker walking on the Z-axis. And just for more detail, the reason why I use Lightwave 20 particularly now is because 20 allows for a higher frame rate. So like, for instance, he's walking at, let me see, this is important to note because this was hosing me up a little bit earlier. No, we don't want to do that, sorry. Let me go to my frame rate meter, right? My frame rate meter. So previous versions of Lightwave underneath 20, previous versions, even 2015, everything else like that. With this, when it comes to the hierarchy in this type of a rig and everything like that, the most you would get is like maybe 15 with the frame dropping, right? So it's going to do, so I have it set to play at exact rate, right? Which is basically same as in Blender with frame dropping, even though Blender's frame dropping is a little steep. But either case, in every other version is gonna play up to like 20 frames, almost 24 frames per second. But in Lightwave 20 and up, you'll get 30 plus, right? And so you can pick up all the small details within the motion. You're not missing anything. If you're rendering 60 frames per second, then that may be slightly different. And this goes up higher, I think, in 2024 as well. But in 2020, we break 30 frames per second, and that's playing at exact rate. So you catch every little detail in the motion for your character and stuff. So that's one thing. So I don't have to hit F11 to pull up the preview window when I'm working, which streamlines the process. In other words, as soon as I hit play to see my animation, I see the exact motion that's going to be captured, and I'm not missing any frame from it because I'm already over 30 frames, like I'm at 31 frames, and this scene is set to 30 frames per second, right? So okay, that's out of the way. The other thing is, okay, so now that not only do I have my character walking, but I added to the root or the master of the rig some motion on the Z, as you see here in the graph editor, right? So his Z-axis, so he's walking along on his Z-axis, and I tracked it. Yes, that's all. I guess I'll do that in another video if anybody wants to see that. So I tracked that properly it was something like every 44 millimeters or something of every step, and but I didn't do every single keyframe. I just did I think I did like maybe 2 cycles or something like that, and then all this is just duplicated onto the timeline, right? Let me get out of fractional frame. Somehow I'm in fractional frame. That's not right. Okay. All right. So that's how that got derived. So it's not like every frame. It's like I think he's on 5. This is a walk, so he's on 10s, right? For this type of character, right? So any case, so he's walking on the Z. So it's like, so you have a choice. If you FBX the whole entire scene out, yeah, he'll be walking on the Z. But if you're already repurposing the animations, in other words, or if you have a default character and you're loading on animations, like as we have in Blender, we have our default character standing, and we're loading on animations, which is which is the way you're going to wind up moving forward anyway, instead of trying to use a default character all the time. And also, you're working with the Blender character that's already surfaced and UV mapped and everything like that. So why would you want to keep on constantly having to redo that by bringing in a brand new FBX model? So how do we bring in both? All right. In my other video for the wild walker walking and running, that was all based on cyclical animation, all coming from the rig, but and it did not involve the master. So this one is going to involve both. We already have, so I have the cyclical walk. That's the same cyclical walk, but it just has the Z. So let's go ahead and export that. And out to 720, right? All right, so that's done. So let's go on over to Blender. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing we did before, which is we're going to select the rig. So you could technically bring in the FBX raw as it is, and then from the action, and then go to your dope sheet and then go into the action editor and then load the motion separately onto your rig from there. But why do that when you can, if you're using, let's say, better FBX, which I'm hoping everybody's using. So we just select the rig. This is only for something being done in place. But that's the first step we do. And that's going to fall into here. See, that's the rig. So when you select the rig, this is the portion of the overall imported rig that you're selecting and loading motion onto. So we're going to do that first, right? Right, and there's our file, and then we just say attach to selected armature, right? And we just say go. We're not worried about anything else. It's just going to merge in. It's just going to merge in all that animation. It's not going to bring in the model or anything else like that. We've already done that. If the model was made from some other app or was made in Blender, whatever it is, the main thing that matters is that the rig has to be the exact rig that's being imported, or the naming convention has to be the same and stuff like that. That's like standard, right? So this is the same process if you're doing like using Cascador with Blender, Motion Builder with Blender. It's all the same thing about importing the FBX data. All right, so it loaded on the cyclical animation and it loaded it into, this is like, what's highlighted here is like the extraneous, or the, what is it? My garbage parts of the rig that I need to delete. So you won't see that necessarily. The rig is loaded. Everything is loaded inside here onto the actual armature. So we just have the walk in place. Okay, that's what was loaded onto the rig. So then it's like, so what's the big deal? So let me just get rid of these extra parts that are not related to anything here. Right, and so then so we have the walk. Now, when I have this selected, you notice that, so anybody, this is particular for anybody who's using a master that's controlling their overall rig, and particularly like it coming from Lightwave or something like that. You notice that I have the master selected. You don't see anything in here selected, but it is selected. In Lightwave, it would be the ring on the ground. This is not the same ring on the ground. This is a floor from Pro Studio Lighting. Right. So, but in order for us to get the Z motion, we need to have that selected. Right. So we already loaded to the armature, which is that armature 001. Right. And you see that in the action editor, by importing it straight to the rig, we automatically see it. And you see it's the whatever file name, and it's the 001. The 001, let me pull this up. The 001 is always the one that goes to the rig. And as you see here, it's 001, and it's 001. The name doesn't matter, but that 001 matters. Okay. Now all it is for, so then that's what it does automatically. Then you go, wait a minute. I had whole forward motion on this thing. How come I'm only seeing the cyclical stuff happening on the rig? And that's because you need to then go to the master. In this particular case, because it's over in Lightwave, so it was the master I left it as called by default was Genoma, right? It'll also say 001, but you don't get confused. It'll also say 001, but we don't care about that. We just go back to the action editor, right? And it takes the very first one. So the very first one that has no increment on it goes to the master. The second one goes to the rig. So we're going to put this on the master. Okay. And technically, let me come out of this mode here so I can actually, there you go. Let me come out of that camera. So now technically he should walk, and he should walk forward. And there he is. Okay. And all that it was is that when you merge in animation, it's going to, through the Better FBX process, it's going to load onto, by selecting the rig, selecting the armature, it's going to load onto the armature. But the master is not the armature. It governs the armature. And so your master, whatever it's called from whatever application you're using, that needs to have a separate load, and it's not the same file. It's the literal action. It'll be listed. It's the root of all the actions. Okay. And so, and then I just want to just explain that in as granular as possible. It's actually simple because it's not like you're loading in two motions or anything. It's just that you may never even look to even pay attention to that mask, to that first file, or you may have selected that first file. Because if you go like this, excuse me, if you're loaded in a character that didn't go through the merging process, it was just an FBX file, and you said, hey, I have the file, and I have all the action, since I have the file, all the actions automatically in Blender are all loaded. And then you say, oh, this is the whole sequence. So I'm going to click on the armature, and I'm going to click on the very first one and watch what happens. And then, bow, then your rig goes everywhere and you're confused because you're like, but that's the action. This is if you did it where you just brought in the overall FBX and were grabbing the action once it was inside. So that's only because, once again, you're actually selecting the roots action, right? So so I know that armature is still selected somewhere out there in Blender space. So I'm just going to put it on 001. And there you go. And so once again, and so his action is the main one, and that's it. And you can keep on loading. So I could go do a run or not a run, and I can do any other actions. And I know that, once again, that this top one is for the master. If the master is needed in that sequence, in a lot of cases it is, because whether, unless you're always just doing like walking in place. So this is for the master. But this has to be manually set, right? And you have to manually click to it. And this is for the actual armature or rig. This is what Better FBX attaches by default. Okay, and then that's it. And then you're rocking and rolling, and you can do whatever else you want to do in Blender or anything else you have to do. Okay, but I just want to kind of go over that with a fine point, because I see a lot of stuff, a lot of vids about walking in place and everything like that, but not necessarily like, oh well, because your character's never walking in place in a let's say in a story, not in a game where everything else is programmatically being done. So anyway, I think it's something important to notice and to note. All right, thanks.